of Thursday Nighter. It's just going to be me tonight. I Am Nubair is coming back 2 weeks from today, but he's currently playing in a big tournament in Thailand. So Nubair is going to be our regular high-rated commentator, though. So looking forward to getting him back. The game's been going on since 6:30, so an hour and a half, and we do have a few games that are already completed, so I'm going to go through those first, and then jump through all the ongoing games in sequence. So, first game that concluded here between Connor Weatherly and Michael Muff, both very strong players. And we got Open Sicilian here, or not quite open yet, but looks like going for delayed Alpin here. And already kind of going, oh no, this is pretty much mainstream theory. 85 second most played by Masters, and getting a pretty typical position here. Okay, Bishop B3, a little bit more rare. Bishop B5 pinning is pretty common. And Queen B6, definitely very rare. But actually has pretty big win rates for black, so this could be some nice prep from Michael. And Connor plays Queen D2, totally kind of taking things out of book. No master games left here. But so let's jump over to the Blitz database. Alright, so both sides developing pretty typically here. Gonna be hard to kind of see how this knight's gonna get developed. So DC5, okay, just helping that bishop get developed, trading some pieces off just to get the bishop out. Seems like kind of conceding a little bit of central space, but yeah, I mean, Engine pretty much thinks it's equal. A little better for black. So, and black is having some king safety issues here to start, and having to move his queen a couple times, so, you know, spending some time taking the bishop. Black is also spending some time on some slow moves, so neither side's hugely high in development here. And now the queen's come off, and the king's actually kind of nicely placed for an endgame. Okay. And trying to get rid of this isolated pawn. You know, one thing I am going to note here is both players are kind of spending some time, but playing pretty quickly. So it makes me think they're not totally in prep, but just kind of trying to play, you know, more rapid blitz style, which I think you might as well spend your time when you've got this classical time. Okay. So now Connor, the one ending up with the isolated pawn. Got some nice central control, but structure might, you know, this might be a kind of double-edged dynamic here, because yeah, you get a little more central control, but it is an isolated pawn that potentially could get picked on later. Okay, so trading pieces makes sense if you're trying to play against white. Should kind of be the dynamic player, I guess, with the IQP. So trading a set of pieces makes sense. And Connor coming in here, and okay, we got a pretty on the edge move here, which definitely is getting some nice tension here. Both ways, both pieces are hanging, so it's getting a little bit shaky here. You know, and Connor deciding to just anchor this knight and protect this pawn tactically. And it looks like this one, unfortunately, even though not a ton of time spent by both sides, had a pretty big blunder here, because this has a pretty big tactical defect that Connor exploited to end this game pretty early. Just knight takes f6. Now these pieces are in contact, so I'm sure Michael was relying on playing something like either bishop takes bishop or rook takes bishop. Maybe something like here and seeing, okay, maybe you can take my pawn with check, but I can attack that knight. Stuff like that. Or saying, hey, it's nice that my rook covers this check, but the real one is rook e8 mate, and so that really necessitates taking back. Or in the case in the game, you just move the bishop, but now he is able to kind of just keep his knight anchored. He's going to move it out, and he's just up a clean piece. So yeah, this was kind of just momentary oversight. It does kind of show, I'd say one lesson from here is whenever you play a move like rook takes d4, or even kind of line the rooks up on the back rank with each other, or potentially even do a rook lift, you kind of want to realize, hey, I'm weakening my back rank. There could be issues here, even though it kind of seems like, hey, a lot of pieces are gone, what tactics could exist, but we kind of see here the back rank issue was what really decided things. So nice game to start by Connor, and yeah, not quite a miniature, but pretty even game out of the opening that was looking to be kind of a practical ending, and then kind of just decided by sudden tactic. So let's take a look at the other completed game between Jeremy and Asher. So Jeremy here, starting with c4 English, and we got reverse Sicilian. So this is pretty much the most principled way to play against the English, and kind of makes your opponent show that they're an Englishman. Having something prepared against reverse Sicilian, they're not just going to be, say, sometimes players who play d4 like to play c4 just to get different versions, to try to move over their opponent into their d4 opening. But when you play c4 e5, it's pretty unlikely white is going to get d4 under super good circumstances, at least as far as transposing the d4 openings. So it kind of carves it into its own space, and especially if you like playing Sicilian white, this is just Sicilian down to tempo, but at the same time it is a lot different, so you can't really just play it like Sicilian. Okay, so let's see here. Knight c3, most common by masters. And knight c6, second most common. Looks like knight f6 is the most common. Okay, knight f3, second most common move as well. Very heavily played by masters. Looks like the general idea is g3, knight f3, bishop g2 potentially. Okay, looks like both sides know their theory pretty well so far. We're getting pretty top moves from masters. This one's pretty rare, fourth most common. Yeah, again, players are just kind of rushing to get their g3 plan in, or else potentially do an e3 plan if they're going to get the bishop out that way. And e4 looks like also a move, although kind of seeing some squares here, so you can see why that's third most popular. But just kind of getting into a symmetrical English, probably going for like a Botvinnik structure later, but then potentially you would want to develop this knight to knight e2 instead of f3, so yeah, and e3, it looks like it has some nice ideas as well, just kind of controlling this square, if especially bishop b4 or maybe knight b4 wants to use it. So I'm not super familiar with all the intricacies of this opening here, but bishop c5 definitely offbeat as far as masters are concerned. Makes sense. Bishop c5 a little bit anti-positional because kind of walking into pawn tempos here on your pieces. So yeah, and say like Ruy Lopez, a lot of times when they play bishop c5 archangel, they want to play like c3 d4. Usually you want to kind of take advantage of black developing that bishop to c5 by eventually gaining some space with tempo with pawn, either b4 or d4. And looks like Jeremy knows that pretty well. And yeah, this is kind of looking silly when you go bishop c5, bishop e7. So definitely got to kind of think ahead here. When you're getting your pieces out, make sure you're not helping your opponent get developed with free tempos. Because yeah, now white looking to have a pretty nice development advantage. You know, they're already white. They already really haven't broken any development rules. Besides, I guess, playing a3, so now they kind of got a3 in for free since b4 came with the tempo. So yeah, white looking pretty strong out of the opening here. Decides to go for e4. Also potentially could have gone for b5 right away. This potentially might have looked something like this. And maybe we want to get the engine on for this. But yeah. So b5, knight d4, by far the most natural move, and knight takes e5 is just pretty much a clean pawn. So potentially a chance for Jeremy there. But it looks like black actually has a pretty nice move here. The engine's pointing out knight a5. So, you know, this is much more natural, but now it's looking like here d6, knight f3, and, you know, we're counterattacking a pawn. So that's something interesting to note. You know, in pretty much all the blitz games, when someone played, not all the blitz games, okay, over 50% of the blitz games, when someone pushed b5 here, they just kind of auto jump to the center. And so you definitely want to consider all your options, because jumping to the center is just kind of superficially looks nice, but jumping to the edge, knights on the rim are dim except for when they attack a weak pawn. And actually knights on the edge are a lot of times pretty well placed if they're going to come back in to some weak squares, like some weak light squares, like white has already weakened here by pushing c4 and a3. We can see b3 is weak, so you know, knight a5 is not. Besides coming to c4, you can also imagine this getting some activity on b3 later in the game, or just participating in attacking this if it ever becomes weak after, say, maybe d4. But okay, that didn't happen in the game. Instead, we've got some more, you know, it makes sense. He kind of wants to just maintain everything here. And, you know, if this isn't working, then it's kind of committal and helping black potentially develop. And maybe he did see knight a5 and just didn't like, you know, knight takes c4 coming, and wants to kind of continue, finish his development, and then kind of try to press this position since he already knows he has a nice development lead. So bishop b2, bishop g4, okay. Don't love bishop g4 here. I think just get castled. Not going to be a huge deal. And maybe he was worried about him playing h3, but, and you can imagine this coming in with tandem with the knights, but he already kind of unpinned. So you can also imagine this coming here. You might anchor. It's just, you don't know what this piece really wants to do yet, but, you know, also bishop g4, probably not the worst. Yeah. So engine kind of doesn't love it, just tells white to continue developing normally, but also not the biggest mistake. Bishop g4 in general, a little bit risky positionally, because white's always going to be able to play h3, and then that bishop has to make a decision. Are you going to trade for the knight, give white the bishop pair? You're going to go to h5, and a lot of people think, hey, going to h5 is great, let me maintain a pin, but especially in this scenario when the pawn has not gone to d4 yet, they're going to just be able to put that pawn on d3. They're going to be able to play h3 g4. This bishop's going to sit on g6 and be completely restricted by white's pawn structure and just kind of be a dumb looking piece. So that's another kind of, I would say, a bit of a positional rule, at least in the Ruy Lopez. You usually don't want to play bishop g4 until white has committed to d4, because now you know, that pawn could be weak. When you're playing bishop g4, you're basically trying to undermine this knight, play around the d4 square, and so that is a little bit consistent with the weakness in this position. You know, he might be entertaining thoughts of takes knight jump. So definitely not the worst idea, but just not like ultra potent, and I really only like to pin it up like that when I feel like it's ultra potent because of that exact positional risk I just mentioned. So both sides continue with some nice development here, just castling, so they know how to play an opening. And white kind of jumping in here with knight d5. I might consider just continuing development either this way if you want the bishop out this diagonal, or here. Looks pretty nice too, although it is kind of just staring at this nice pawn chain. So you're going to have to kind of try to break that down at some point if you want a bishop on b2 to get activity. So not totally clear how to develop here. It looks like engine likes d3. Let's say d3, he makes a nothing move, and just bishop e3. So yeah, you don't just want to auto go to the long diagonal, especially if you're going to stare at a chomp down pawn chain. And here, you know, the bishop might be a little bit better placed here, helping control this this square without the knight moving, and you know, maybe supporting c5 or something later. I'm gonna try not to turn the engine on too much because my computer likes to kick a super loud fan on if I'm running the engine too long. So okay, so we're starting to get tactical here though, and at least makes sense a bit positionally to test white out here of what he's thinking with his knight d5 move before he completed development, when black's kind of got their development complete. And yep, engine likes it. So this is the critical move, and black is up for the challenge. Okay, white just grabbing the bishop here. And so if that's really all he had in mind, okay. And then going for knight takes e5. Because yeah, bishop pair is not enough. He needed a whole combination here, and so maybe knight takes. Maybe here seeing fork potential, but yeah, calculation is my weakness here, so I'm not going to try to calculate all the lines here myself, although it'd probably be good practice. But I want to get to the live games, so yeah, let's just see here. Yep, okay, queen takes e5 is the tactical harshest punishment. So you know, maybe he was seeing lines like d takes e5, bishop takes g4, or you know, knight takes e5, bishop takes g4. But queen takes, and if you're still playing your same bishop takes g4, now we got a counter threat to the rook on a1. So we are kind of actually seeing an acute tactical downside of kind of not following development rules. So this actually, if we jump back here, you know, knight d5, I would say is pretty straightforward mistake. You know, not just because, yeah, because it allows the tactic, but also just positionally because you're moving a piece twice in the opening before all your pieces are developed. And so, you know, the developing moves here are either bishop e2 or d3 and bishop e3. And then past that, getting your rooks out, you know, potentially just getting a free move on this bishop to also, especially if you go for d3 bishop e3, you know, you maybe don't want any knight g4 jumps later. So nice little include to you know, also get some room for your king and potentially restrict that bishop down in that same way I mentioned with this, and you know, potentially a g4 later. So yeah, here I guess we just kind of had basically tactical oversights with weak back rank, disconnected rooks. That's also why, even, so the bishop's not connecting the rooks, but even the queen not getting out of the way is a big thing for a lot of tactics. So a lot of strong players, they really don't feel secure until all their pieces are developed and the rooks are connected, because they're just having to worry about calculating tactics otherwise. And yeah, so here Asher found this nice critical move, hitting the rook, and cold shower. Okay, d4. Maybe that's what he was relying on. Okay, makes sense. And so he was, he did see the queen hitting the rook and was kind of thinking, okay, well, I'll pawn tempo, but now we got Zwischenstück, intermezzo, check to this miserable queen, and queen check's also a very powerful tactical motif. Not quite as powerful as the king check, but if you're evaluating several forcing moves in the same position and one is attacking the queen, it's a little extra forcing because that queen's got to move for the most part. And yeah, dust is settled here, or settling. And count the material here. Both sides have 2 rooks, but black's got an extra piece. These knights are beautiful in the center. There's queen's anchor behind it. Not seeing a ton of tactical potential for white, and black's even got an extra pawn, so -5 here. Yeah, just brutal. Most lines worked except for queen takes e5 and bishop takes e2, and he found both those critical moves. And yeah, pretty impressive too, because look at this time usage. Really only 10 minutes off his clock, so Asher kind of showing he's up for the calculation challenge in his games and probably does his puzzles. Okay, queen b2, queen f6. Let's just see how this played out, because black is up a full piece here. And okay, nice. I guess here he's worried about 8-3. So, well played game by both players. Jeremy got nice little opening advantage, and had a nice plan with a3, b4. And I would say Asher definitely made a mistake on bishop c5, bishop e7, but kind of just hunkered down, completed his development, and then early knight d5 jump before developing this dark square bishop kind of left to this tactical weakness that ultimately got exploited. So that's kind of, I would say, the summary of this game. But yeah, nice game by both players, and blunders like this happen, especially when it's kind of one critical line and a lot of other lines are working for you. You saw all those other working lines, but maybe just didn't see the one that didn't. So okay, now let's jump to the live games. So here we got camera board here, Dane against Robert. So Dane in the purple plaid and Robert in the blue jacket, and both are very strong players, over 2100, or actually Robert's dropped a little below 2100, but very strong. And both Robert's a crazy attacker, plays crazy openings, but Dane is not one to shy away and also will match him. So let's see how this started. Dane playing as Petrov main, and really probably his best opening, or at least his most principled. And going for an Italian, okay. But it's just knight takes e4, going for... yeah, so this isn't an Italian, obviously. We're already in Petrov, so definitely not familiar with this bishop c4 variation, but looks like this is a gambit variation of the Petrov, and so not surprised to see Robert try to play a gambit line here, and jumps in with knight takes e5. Okay, so we already are totally out of master games. Bishop c4 played in 170 master games, knight takes e4 played in most of them, and then knight takes e5 played in almost none of them. So most of the masters opting for knight c3, trying to provoke this and really just get this development. Black maybe plays f6, white castles, and and it looks like they like to go for knight h4. Maybe try to play around these light squares since black played f6. You know, getting ideas of queen h5, knight g6 maybe. So, and yeah, this does look a bit dangerous. So, yeah, that's pretty interesting. Maybe knight c3, a little bit more ambitious way. And then knight takes e5. But computer actually likes knight takes e5. So it looks like both are good ways to play. So, okay, knight takes e5, d5, queen f3. And, you know, we're getting some pretty dynamic play here, but dynamically equal, minus 0.4. So neither side's blundered yet. And bishop b3 is blunder though, because it allows queen g5. Minus 1.5, so let's take a look at this. Just threatening the knight, so knight's got to come back. Knight develops. Maybe let's hit that queen. And let's just park this queen on h6. So this is interesting. I've seen Nathan play this way pretty successfully, just parking a queen on h6 like this. So not something I'm totally familiar with, because to my to my eyes it just looks a little drafty here, but computer loves it. And yeah, I've seen Nathan play that way, so at some point I'm gonna have to ask my coach about queen h6 vibes and why getting your queen out here in the early middle game is so powerful in some positions. So I'm not going to fault Robert for not finding queen g5, especially with the idea of just parking it on h6 after h4. So, but I guess, yeah, you know, one interesting thing is it does make it hard to develop, because you can't push this pawn, this bishop's hanging until this knight develops. So maybe that messes with White's desired development order. So, okay, Dane continuing to castle, and now we're kind of back to dynamic equality. And yeah, it's hard to fault him too much for bishop b3, not seeing queen g5. Okay, just make sure. Yeah, the engine's kind of lagging me up here, so I'm not going to do too much engine. Okay, so takes a knight here, taking some space on the queen side, but you know, what piece really wants to use this square, and these pieces need to get developed, so I'm not, and this just seems, yeah, I mean, you got queen protecting it, but don't love a4. Computer doesn't either, just jumps to -1. And just wants him to be cold-blooded, say, hey, you're coming, but really don't care about that. So this is interesting. But it's bishop e7, okay, principled by Dane. And a5, yeah, continuing to kind of caveman that pawn forward, but these pieces want to get developed. I mean, this one you can imagine participating in the action, never having developed, which I do kind of like delaying development of bishop c1, just because knights before bishops, you don't need to develop your dark square bishop, or I mean your queenside bishop to castle kingside. So it's, and a lot of times you just want to be flexible with it. You know, sometimes it wants to come here, sometimes it wants to come here, here, here. All those are things that could happen. And then even the glorious bishop h6, participating in tactics, never having moved, is of course awesome, because you didn't even develop the piece for it to participate in lethal tactics. So that's actually something a bishop can do that a knight cannot, is for a knight to participate in lethal tactics, it always has to develop. So castle, rook e1 makes sense. This is an important pawn. f6 also makes sense, trying to get some eyes on this queen, plus let's get rid of this pawn that's a thorn in my side. Let's open up the position for these bishops, even though both sides have bishops. And queen h5. Okay. Yeah, I mean, Robert, you got to get your pieces developed, especially this knight. What's this knight going to do? And now you're begging black to take this thing because you're just going to get a fractured structure as well. So Dane obliges, as I would as well. And now just kind of kicking this queen. And Robert's going for dynamic tactics here. So e6 is the best move in the position. So it looks like bishop g4 is already, yeah, I mean, come on, you can't allow, queen h5 really makes no sense. This queen needed to anchor this piece, especially after you went a4, a5. So I feel like, yeah, Dane just completed his development and is playing normal positional moves, and Robert's playing a bit anti-positional here. So it's no surprise that his position is starting to collapse. And bishop g4, nice find here. So I think let's get, okay. And yep, here in the tactics, you know, they've kind of settled, and we've got a totally open position. Black's got the bishop here. 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But this pawn is not long for this life. Completely unrealistic to think that white's ever going to be able to support that pawn. And so now black just has a technically winning position. That I think kind of white self-sabotaged here. Okay. Bit controversial here, I'd say. You know, maybe he just doesn't want to leave that pawn on the 6th rank for future sacrifice tactics or something like that. But I mean, taking this is giving yourself a weak pawn on an open file and giving this rook a lot of activity. But looks like Engine's liking b6 and b takes fairly similarly. So yeah, especially just wants to pick up this pawn. So yeah, it's kind of, if I go into a sub variation, it's kind of messing me up here. So yeah, I would say a bit unnecessary, giving oh, nice to see you in the chat, Matt. Thanks for joining. Yeah, I like b6 a little bit better as well, just because, and then just let's pick this pawn up as quickly as possible, just because we're technically winning and we don't really want to get into dynamics with the pawn sitting on the 7th. So, but Dane never want to shy away from dynamics, even in a dead one position. So, you know, wants to keep it exciting and decides to, yeah, go for some tactical trades here. And he does like these double pawns now on this open file that he's going to kind of counterattack, and he is coming to wrangle this pawn in time anyways. Okay, so white getting a little activity with the rooks on the a file, and Dane thinking, you know, okay, actually I was thinking he wanted to trade a pair of rooks, but he's actually fine just giving up this weak pawn. I think, yeah, as soon as you play this earlier, it's pretty predictable that this is going to happen at some point. So okay, white's still got a weak back rank he's got to worry about a little bit here. Yeah, trade the bishop pair is a good point too. Yeah, that's interesting. So, um, yeah, black's the one who has the bishop pair, so this is actually a favorable trade for white. Um, Whenever your opponent has the bishop pair and you don't, you want to trade the one bishop you do have so they don't have the pair anymore. Um, so yeah, and these pieces were totally undeveloped, so I think he's kind of in technical conversion mode, but I think even when you're in technical conversion mode and wanting to trade down material, you still want to really only make favorable trades, and probably trading off your bishop pair and helping your opponent develop is probably not a totally favorable trade. And let's see what the engine thinks of that too. Yeah, kind of jumping from minus 1.6 to minus 0.6 with this decision, which definitely makes sense positionally. So yeah, Dane I think could have made this a little easier on himself just by keeping things locked down. Come and corral this pawn, keep the bishop pair, keep everything safe, solid, activate your king, and just kind of close this one out Karpov style. But I don't think that's Dane's general temperament, so not surprised to see him engage in tactics even in a better position. But now we're seeing White get a little bit of counterplay, and Robert actually has very excellent endgames, so that's how he gets away with some of this anti-positional openings is he gets his losing position, but if the opponent doesn't find all the knockouts, he comes back in the endgame. So here, yep, okay, yeah, kind of threatening some back rank stuff a little bit, but not really because this piece is pinned and the knight is protecting. But still are definitely favoring the bishop against the knight. And engine showing that minus 0.9. Okay. And active rook. Okay. Rook endgames. Always want to keep your rook active. And one other nice thing here is rook bishop work better as a pair than knight rook. Knight and queen work well together, and bishop and rook work well together. They kind of complement each other. And so do want to get to all the games. So we do have a pretty interesting endgame still going on here, dynamically fairly equal. So a bit of a slip on technique by Dane, but at the same time not claiming I would do any better. So let's jump to game 2. And here we got Miles against John. So John, Miles coming off last month's tournament win, and nice win last week, I believe against Norm, or let's just quickly see who Miles played last week. Yep, Miles. Okay, Miles actually had a draw against Norm last week. So that was a bit unnecessary, but let's jump back to the rounds. Okay, so that's live position, and John coming off a huge win against Connor, who already won his game against Michael. So nice win by John last week and earned his spot on board 2 here against Miles. And both sides okay, knight f3, knight f6, and Miles playing kind of his home Nimzo-Larsen structure. Miles loves the Nimzo-Larsen and plays it on both sides, among some other mainline openings like e5. And John looks like he's playing kind of copycat here, doing Queen's Indian himself, saying, okay, you want to play passive, I'll play passive. And yeah, this is getting, we still got full copycat here. So, and this is all, okay, c5 a bit uncommon, bishop e7 more common, d5 more common. But, okay, knight takes. First interesting decision here. Yeah, Master's definitely playing e takes pretty overwhelmingly here. Still pretty low on game counts here, but Master games go here. just develop like this, totally equal position, zeros. Nice bishops on that potentially could attack, but hey, so does black. So when you play an opening like Nimzo Larsen, you're engaging in trades. So it's definitely, you get to play your home structure. You get to play. You get to know where your pieces belong. Put your pieces on their home squares. Maybe learn some cool plans like knight takes on occasion instead of pawn takes, like everyone's expecting. But as a downside to that, you're giving black some chances too to make it a 3-result game, not pressure their development too much. So yeah, but it's a good strategy too. You get a lot of home knowledge, and it's good to play the same structures over and over. But knight takes, pretty interesting decision here. I'd say a little more anti-positional, because whenever you recapture the piece in the center, you're basically kind of ceding some central squares. So there was a pawn here that was controlling some central squares, and when you recapture the piece, or your opponent does, you always kind of want to look at, okay, well, now how do I use e5? So d5 goes for a break quickly. John also pretty good with his openings. So Miles is really the one to vary here with knight takes, and so they're probably both definitely thinking on their own at this point, although John's still blitzing his moves. I think it's pretty unlikely this is prep from John. He just likes to move fast if he feels like he knows what's going on in the position. And okay, bishop comes in here. An interesting decision. Definitely not sure what I think about that, so let me ask the engine. Yeah, doesn't mind trading that bishop. It is super active bishop for black, so I don't mind it at all. I think kind of identify your opponent's most active or most lethal possible pieces and just trade those off is a pretty good middle game strategy. So a bit underdeveloped here, though. I love to complete all my development before engaging in operations like this if I can, but it was provoked by a6, so black's spending some time on that as well. And yeah, he did successfully trade off this monster bishop and get a nice tempo on the queen. Tempo is pretty useless because he's got to use it to retreat right back, but I'd say that's a success. A lot more likely that bishop was going to be used against white than black, just from the vibes. So who knows, but queen h5 I don't love, though. Let's get this knight developed at some point. Your pieces all need to play. But no big deal. Queen h5, queen h3, and now gets his knight out. And we just got a position here, zeros. So I'm gonna go a bit quick here. One definite thing to note here is Miles on the live game clock is down to under 10 minutes, and John's got an hour 10. So this is, even though this is a pretty equal position. Ooh, okay, so this is turning into big time advantage. So it looks like, yeah, he tanked for a solid 15 minutes here, calculating knight takes e6. And actually, wow, knight takes e6, best move in the position. So nice find by Miles. So what's going on here? It looks like if they play rook takes c1, rook takes, say pawn takes, yeah, I mean, you can't, you just have piece hanging here. So, okay, that's the main tactic, I guess, is just queen takes, queen takes. So yeah, definitely got to criticize John a little bit here, just kind of quick moving bishop d6. It wasn't he spent 6 minutes, but spend 6 minutes to put your piece on a hanging square that's not anchored. He wants to attack with it, but yeah. I didn't spot it instantly because I'm tactically weak, but this is honestly a puzzle rush tactic. So, gotta be seeing those. And rook FE8, it's okay. So, just kind of seeing, yep, I don't want to hang a piece here, so let me just move my rook. It's just a pawn. Things are going to get crazy here, and maybe white will end up dropping a whole piece. Okay. Miles found the second best move here, knight c4. Still attacking that bishop, so if he plays, say, rook takes, knight takes. Oh, you can't take there, but because queen h3, nicely placed from earlier. But if you do intermezzo here, still not really helping you. Because if it wants queen a8, queen b8, queen d7. Just cover the back rank. Yeah, okay. You can't play rook takes knight or you're going to get back ranked. But black here is up a full rook and can just make sure he doesn't get back rank mated and probably win. Let's see even. Oh, no, actually, sorry. White is winning here. So, yeah, queen b8. Get the queen out of danger while defending the back rank mate, but he can just play rook c8. So, yeah, my tactical vision there, not great. So knight c4, nice move, but at the same time, actually, he had a stronger move. Knight takes g7, which is totally fracturing this king side. And if we see, say, bishop takes e5, now we're hitting this knight, or this rook. So rook, get it out of the way. But then here, the queen h3 is coming into play. So, let's imagine taking here. So if he takes here, we can intermezzo. But now, just take back here, and we're still hitting the rook. And, we don't have the play on the rook anymore, but we can just retreat the knight and play against this totally fractured king. So that's interesting. But let's go ahead and get to the live game. So pretty cool idea, queen h5, queen h3, and it is showing it's enabling a lot of tactics, especially when black is really tempted to use this open c file. And so his pieces are going to end up there, the queen's eyeing it. But yeah, again, don't love waiting until move 16 to develop your queenside knights, but did look like it is working out dynamically for Miles this game. Okay, so gets a nice tempo on the queen. Yep, and we jumped here, knight takes e6, and knight c4 is where we left off. Okay, bishop b8, and now knight takes g7. So he did find it a move later, and this is still quite good for white. Just wants to get the last piece into the attack, a little more so than shift the queen here. But hanging queen here, you can kind of see his mentality. And protects the queen, gets the last rook into play. At this point he's pressuring his clock pretty heavily. So, white's totally winning on the board, but 6 minutes on the clock, anything could happen. This is also featured on the camera, so this is the very closest board. John's on the left. Alright. Alright, we're gonna, before we jump to the next game, let's take a quick break. And we had Matt, we might still have him in the chat. And he's a sponsor of our channel. So Chess Goals is a company he owns, chessgoals.com, along with his business partner, and they produce simple chess courses for non-grandmasters. So you can learn complete repertoires in under 100 lines. I own the Catalan course myself, and he's got a nice private Discord for anyone who's bought any of his courses where he answers any questions you have. So you get PGNs, videos of him explaining everything, and so very similar to, say, a Chessable course. You could even take those PGNs, load them to a site like Chess Tempo or Lee Study, and do spaced repetition on them yourself. So definitely check the courses out if you're looking for a new opening, looking for something that works well at the club level, and especially is going to appear on the board. Lots of lines from Lee Chess Database, that type of thing. So, and if you do decide to purchase a course from Chess Goals, make sure you use coupon code CASTLE to save 30%. So let's jump back to the next game. So Eddie took cap point by round 1, but Eddie, big channel supporter, and paired up against Ezekiel today. So with the white pieces, opening with e4, we got a king's pawn game, and another Petrov. So following Ezekiel, following in Dane's footsteps, and Eddie playing the really critical 3d4. So this is pretty popular amongst I'd say opening nerds. So Eddie, pretty big opening nerd himself, and knows a lot of dangerous things. And knight takes e4, bishop d3. So this is pretty much very dynamic line, very dynamic way to play against the Petrov. Both sides showing they kind of know their theory so far. Although Ezekiel playing bishop e7, looks like Masters really like knight d7, challenging this knight immediately. But bishop e7 definitely not bad, and played by Masters. Okay, Eddie the first to kind of vary here from master ideas. Masters really like knight c3 or really overwhelmingly c4. Let's undermine this knight. Let's get back to a more typical Petrov position. They'll also play it, looks like Jobava London style, trying to bait this pawn structure fracture, but it looks like this is still very slightly better for white. They're probably going to get rid of this pawn later, undermine black center, have two nice central hanging pawns. So that's a way that some masters play, pretty rare though, but c4 looks like the positional and principal try from Masters. So Eddie varying from both moves with knight d2, but this was played by some pretty strong players, including Moisenko, 2600 plus, so can't be too bad. f6, challenging the knight right away. So this looks a bit dubious, but also makes a lot of sense if it works. I turned the engine on because I'm expecting there to be some tactical refutation with no master games there, but there isn't. So it makes sense. Let me kick this knight that's very well placed and centrally anchored. And he just decides to retreat, and then okay, we're going f5 after. Probably a very typical idea for the Petrov. I'm not a Petrov player myself, but quite happy just to sink that knight right back into the central hole, and now we got to try to trade that guy off. Makes sense, and he does so successfully. So along with developing a piece for free, essentially, when you go here, it takes this recapture is something you have to do, so it's almost a free move, and now this bishop is a lot more active than it was on c8, and things are starting to get connected. So I would say that's a favorable transformation for black. Okay, white now trying to play around this hole. So both sides playing around their opponent's weak central square. Makes a lot of sense. And bishop e6 here. Okay, a bit strange, but Also not, he just wants to make room for his queen to get developed in some way and connect these rooks. I was wondering about c5. You know, c5 is very also positional. Let me fight against my opponent's center. And looks like Engine likes that as well, so I would definitely be pretty seriously considering c5 instead of something kind of passive like this, I would say. Even though this is not bad at all. But this, I feel like I'm making progress. I'm chipping down my opponent's center. I'm taking steps forward to try to take over in this game versus, when I just shuffle my bishop here, I feel like I'm kind of already playing defense. I'm playing chicken, saying, what are you going to do, white? Which I'm also happy to do if the position calls for it, but I feel like, hey, if you got a nice central break and it's working, play it as black. Okay. Alright, but both players kind of just happy to kind of sit on the existing pawn structure and maneuver their pieces. And both sides getting developed, getting the rooks connected, hopefully, if Eddie decides to just jump right back. So this is kind of funny, it's just knights jumping. So this is a new knight at least. This knight didn't come back and jump back. That's what I was maybe thinking for a second. But okay, so next knight jumps in, and let's see why this is so poison. I mean, of course, here is you're just losing a piece. So that's the tactical justification. But if you just ignore that pawn, still now this is a nice asset. So looks like 95 is kind of tactically justified. Jumps in, there's a thorn in black's side. Nice central knight again, and it's tactically working. Simply because the queen's not a good piece to recapture here. So getting the rook in place, and now his bishop move is looking a little silly because it's in the way. Okay, white finally taking the chance to kick black's central knight now that he's kind of gotten the rest of his stuff done. And I doubt that white is going to play f4 because he probably wants to control that square, although I look and see in the game that he decided to play f4 fairly quickly anyways, just anchoring that knight after it dropped back. And I do kind of like this as well because that knight's not coming back that easily. This bishop can move, or if this bishop takes, he's got a nice protected passer. If the bishop moves, it just feels awkward, like his already bishop shuffle, and you maybe could see a path back. But so don't hate f4 here, because you are weakening the square, but you're giving yourself that Pillsbury anchored knight. And it's hard for black to get at the square in the same amount of time. So an engine does slightly like white right now, but nothing crushing. So g5 though, bold. So almost looks suicidal to me because we still have queens on. We still have bishop pair on that's pointed at your king. This queen could be potentially targeted. So I feel like it's self-inducing weaknesses. But could be totally wrong here because it could be undermining this knight in a big way. But nope, engine not liking it. So you can almost predict what moves the engine's going to hate, and so I try to predict those myself and just not play them, even if they kind of look like they might be cool. But that said, g5 might be winning in some positions, and then I just don't find it. But to me, I feel like this is how you start the beginning of the end of classical games. Is I don't know what's going on, so I'm just gonna lash out here, or or, you know, not I don't know what's going on, but I've developed all my pieces and I don't know what to do next. So looks like a more chill move here was knight d8 or rook b8, just defending the pawn. You know, looks like you really didn't like the idea of playing b6 because, yeah, you're softening up all these light squares and you can imagine the bishop accessing them. So I can see why he didn't want to play b6, but, you know, he did have a couple quote-unquote ugly moves. Rook b8 and knight d8 to kind of just passively, you know, this is the one I probably kind of prefer aesthetically, just to keep my rook on the open file, and, you know, now I'm even connecting some of my stuff and maybe making a space for my bishop to move back and open the file eventually. Although I don't know if I really want to do that immediately. But interesting though. Okay, g5 and takes. And rook e3, okay. Eddie just playing it excellently. He's just basically developing a free attack that black offered up. So black not going to get nearly the same counterplay against white's king as white's going to get against black's king, with these pieces already well coordinated, but maybe that's not always obvious, and I am shaded by the engine. So here's live position. Eddie's starting to mount a nice attack, but he's down to 31 minutes, but that's a huge amount of time for Eddie, so I'd say congratulations to Eddie for doing some nice time management this game and not being on 1 minute when he gets to this position. But definitely not even close to decisive. Attack brewing, favoring white, but very double-edged position and could turn on one blunder. Board 4 was counter against Michael. We already went through this game, but just quick recap here. Mostly decided by this rook takes d4 blunder, which dropped a full piece because of rook e8 mate threats, which kind of ruined black's intermezzo tactical variations. Alright, and first look we're getting at National Master Nathan Hoover, Tournament Director, and big support of the channel, setting up the DGT broadcast that we rely on to show you guys all the games. So very much appreciate Nathan's support. And he's playing against club up-and-comer Daniel. And Daniel winning a lot of games lately. And looks like playing Premier Section this month. Or it's possible he's playing Nathan on... Yeah, I believe he's playing Premier Section this month. So, anyways, Daniel, nice member of the club, and also checks out our YouTube videos. So appreciate you for watching the replay later, Daniel. Nice to see you. And looks like Daniel is Scandi player. So, and Nathan just kind of ignoring the Scandi and playing 2d4. So Nathan has said he wants to play a gambit against every single opening. So it looks like Blackmore Deemer. Gambit here is his gambit against Scandi. So Daniel takes it up for the challenge, and yeah, already masters don't play this. You know, masters don't play. Well, they do a little bit. So d4, knight c3, knight f6. Masters overwhelmingly here playing f3. So, but bishop g5 is a more uncommon move, also played by masters. So this is probably Nathan's preparation. And Daniel already varying, which makes sense because it's kind of super offbeat opening. How are you going to be well prepared for this? But masters like bishop f5 here, f3, and knight b7, bishop c4, h6, bishop h4, and knight b6. So anchor this pawn. I guess because you really don't want to be helping white develop this if you can. So, okay, but bishop g4. Still, black's got a slightly better position, which makes sense because they're up a pawn right now. Okay, g4 and playing against that bishop, but hey, it's probably happy anchoring his extra pawn, so definitely not hating black at all. Engine's not either, minus 0.5. But hey, minus 0.5 when you're up full pawn shows white's going to have a lot of activity here, and this is what Nathan's playing for with his gambit line. So Nathan completing his development, and you know this bishop's going to have a nice way to get activity too, and it's not hard to see him winning this pawn back. So you can see why he doesn't totally hate the idea of playing a gambit line like this, because working out pretty well, I'd say, in this game as far as the activity white's getting, and he's pretty likely to get the pawn back anyways. So threatening this bishop, I kind of like it. I think I like just playing bishop g2 first, but the computer definitely likes knight f4 better. Okay, so I guess knight f4 does indirectly prevent h6, so that's a nice little feature. Because now we'll just snap this bishop and ruin his pawn structure. So that's pretty cool. Just pressure the bishop and in effect preserve your bishop on g5 a little better. A lot of times when I see knight d2 or knight d2, knight f4, it's to control the d5 break. So especially if black has played d6 in kind of like a perk or a modern, or in my case when I played center game a lot, if they played d6 against center game, which is pretty passive, then you can play knight e2, knight f4, clamp down on the square so they can never get d6, d5 in. And if they never can get d6, d5 in, then a lot of times you can get a free kingside attack because you control the center. So, you know, that's a big concept when if you're thinking about picking up hedgehog yourself and having your bishop trapped behind the pawn and playing kind of passive passive pawn structures with the pawn on d6. You know, if white kind of controls the center, they're a lot more likely to have a successful attack because those pieces can move through the center, and it's just you need to be able to have a counter break in the center while they're attacking you. And so yeah, I definitely don't mind playing against hedgehog type structures with d6 myself. Just yeah, control their central break forever, calculate d5 every move. But clearly that's not even this position, so a bit of a tangent there. Okay, he actually decides to develop to e2. A bit surprising because hey, there's a pawn here. Let's pressure it. Also, let's pressure the square behind. So yeah, engine like in g2 is slightly better. But e2, no big deal either. Let's see, where are we? Here. Okay, so queen a5 was played. Honestly, this seems a bit loose by Daniel. I'm already, yeah, because knight f4 supports this knight. So you already can't castle here because, let's just say they play a nothing move and you castle, they can just play a knight here. Oh, not quite, but so don't play a3 because that's not the tactic I'm thinking of. But play king b1, which is a move you want to play anyways to get your king safe. And now if they castle, I think you can play knight here, opposing these queens, and if they take here, you could take here, and the king cannot come and attack this knight. Kind of typical dragon tactic. Let's make sure, turn the engine on to make sure that actually worked. And it's not actually, because here they have bishop d8, moving out of this Zwischenzug and protecting the queen. So that's cool. Don't put all your eggs in this hanging queen basket, and yeah, look for this bishop d8 resource. But so maybe queen a5 is called for, but feels a little loose, feels a little, I guess he's hitting here. So it's probably his main idea. And yeah, it looks like I was totally blundering earlier. King b1 would just blunder my bishop. So seeing my own ideas more than my opponents, also an issue I have. But h4, okay, the games get a little messed up when I do alternate variations. h4, h6. Yeah, okay, so, and now we kind of see the point of knight f4 earlier is whenever he plays h6, he's going to snap that bishop and ruin the pawn structure. And then just kind of pull the bishop back. Say, okay, I got my nice static advantage here, now maybe let's collect this pawn back at some point. And yeah, I mean, black's kind of got a little bit messed up structure, and white's got two bishops against two knights, which is a huge endgame advantage. But the position's not open, the center's pretty closed, black's got an extra pawn still. So the extra pawn is speaking a little bit here, but definitely would not be surprised to see the bishops take over in this position. So okay, let's just go a little quickly here. So we see something crazy. Just got rid of this weakness. You can see why I didn't really mind that earlier. You knew this was coming later. But it does open the b file for a little bit of something maybe. Throw the engine on just in case we see any missed blunder, any missed wins here or anything, but it looks pretty straightforward. Chess never straightforward, but nothing crazy happening. Okay, it looks like Nathan making a pretty big mistake here with GH. Because now black has a pretty sick exchange sack, which is not really an exchange sack because he's winning the exchange right back. So bit of a mischance there for Daniel. But instead play GH. Got to be tactically aware. Okay, and this is blunder though. And he does find the most critical punishment. So yeah, it looks like you're collecting these pawns, but now he's gonna do the fork. So could have done a move earlier, but still got it done, and it's actually more potent in this position. So ended up benefiting him to play one move later. And we see here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versus 1, 2, 3, 4. But this is apparently minus 2.6. It looks like White still got more counterplay than that evaluation, but yeah, especially here now it's totally equalized. So his totally winning lines involve preserving this pawn, it looks like. So king f7, any of these king advances, activating the king. Let's just say king f7 to really pressure the rook would be probably the most human. And now playing knight g2. Oops, sorry. that easy. But it makes a bit of sense if we think about it logically. You know, why is it so important to protect this pawn? It's more about this pawn. You know, this is our real ticket to glory here, especially supported by the knight and rook. We want to get this guy going, and what's the best way to stop a passed pawn is get a rook behind it. So when we defend this pawn, we're not only kind of preserving this pawn, but we're saying the race is on. Sure, take this guy and try to get your h-pawn queen, but that's not going to happen before I get my e-pawn making lethal counterplay in tandem with my knight and rook. Definitely not claiming I would find that in a game, but it at least makes some logical sense of why it's so important to anchor this pawn, because it's just kind of, you're really anchoring this pawn indirectly by preventing the rook from getting behind it. But knight f5 was a bit of a big mistake here, because now it allows him to take this pawn with check, get behind this pawn, and take it. And so he lost his glorious passed pawn, and we're totally equal here. Although now white is actually up a pawn, so now it's really going to be black. Okay, but black picks up a pawn, you know. So we're getting towards drawish territory just because, yeah, both sides are kind of running low on pawns. It looks like black had a chance here, though, to kind of take over if he was an endgame god. By swinging the rook to take, and then it would anchor the knight. Pawns on both sides. So Nathan is pretty good at endgames. But Daniel's been showing he knows what he's doing too. Closing out his game last week with some pretty nice endgame technique. So I'd say this one's headed towards a draw, but if anyone wins, I wouldn't be shocked if Nathan tricks him in the endgame somehow. But I'd say pretty likely draw. Maybe Nathan wins if he tricks him, especially since he's down to 636. But doubt it. Yeah, it looks like he's about to pick up this pawn, and then he can even just sack the knight for the last pawn. And so this is pretty much headed towards draw. So, all right, well, we got 3 more boards. I'm going to take a short break, and we will get back to the completed game between Norm and Nathan. So Nathan playing 2 boards tonight, totally focused on his game against Daniel now, but he did beat Norm. Asher against Jeremy, we already went through the whole game, but we'll do another quick review of it. And we got Mitchell against Ralph. Haven't covered that game at all, so we'll definitely cover Nathan against Norm and Mitchell against Ralph when we come back. But for now, let me just leave you with the live position on board 1 between Dane and Robert. That's seen in the camera between Dane in purple plaid and Robert in the blue jacket. It looks like Dane is actually crushing on this endgame up a full exchange. So Robert's tanking here, but Dane's winning. And we did have results on board 2, so we'll go through all of that as well. But I'm going to take a short break, and I'll be right back. I don't have a blocker on my new computer, but oh well. So this looks like to be pretty much finishing up. Yep, black's dead winning here, so this is the camera board. Let's just see what actually happened leading up to this, from where we left off. So where did this exchange get won? Okay, so he just got he allowed the rook to get, or I mean, he allowed this knight to get pinned, and now he's gonna unpin his bishop in time to probably deal with this. So let's say he tries to get out this way, he's just coming right away. Let's say he pins, he's just unpinning. So it looks like just a one move blunder. Rook here allowing a lethal pin. So you got to see your opponent's ideas. John against Miles. John having an excellent tournament. One against Connor, one against Miles. Both Miles and Connor are frequent winners of the entire tournament, so wins against both in the same month is really good showing by John this month. Miles trading off that nice bishop, but yeah, kind of doing the queen maneuver, doing his slowish queen maneuver, but worked out nicely. And was nailing a lot of tactics here, including the tactic that happened in the game. Knight takes a6, nice tactic. So it looks like his time trouble is going to come into play, because Miles actually was kind of outplaying John objectively at the start. Yep, knight takes g7. Yeah, in this position, Miles is plus 1.5. Plus 4 here. So yeah, brutal one to go through an analysis when you realize how winning you were and it got turned around. But let's see how this swindle happened. Okay, so white's still winning here, kind of in conversion mode, but under 2 minutes. So time use issue here. Yeah, so far so good. I mean, white is just up 3 clean pawns. Oh, and here's where the blunder comes in. So here, defending this way, but he had bishop takes e5. Now he's threatening back rank, plus undermining this defender. And he's worried about this because he would just take his bishop, so it's made sense. He wants to defend. So yeah, allowing these into place was kind of brutal. Computer likes this, but who's going to play that? And do your own counterattack. So brutal. Miles pretty much totally outplayed John, but got hit by a nice tactic at the end that John found. So great job by John to find bishop takes e5. Desperate times call for desperate measures, but he found it. And looks like he either flagged here or resigned. But because John was tanking, you know, he had no time left. He probably played rook c8. John's sitting there tanking with his king in check, and he probably resigned in that position, realizing that king d7 was now black's up a whole piece. I'm not exactly sure what happened at the end of the game, but brutal for Miles. Well played game throughout the game, and just kind of got hit by a cheapo at the end, but also great tactical alertness by John, and nice job swindling. Okay, Ezekiel against Eddie. Hey, we had the kind of crazy G5 lash, and then Eddie was building up a nice attack. That's kind of where we left off. He's bringing his queen in. I like it. Everything's getting lined up. You know, black doing his own counterattack. But so could get dynamic here. G3 blunting the rooks, but softening these squares. It's really hard to imagine the bishop getting at him, so that's a nice kind of dynamic white's got going on. This bishop's kind of stupid. So this is the live position, and both sides got time to think here, so this is, you know, a real classical game with a lot of tactics going on, both sides having pieces fairly well activated, but white definitely better than black. But a lot to calculate here. Both have the time to calculate it, so we'll see how this finishes. But white's got a pretty big advantage here, +2 or plus 1.8. Again, we already went through this one. Okay, this was, I thought, headed towards a pretty clean draw. But looks like he did grab that pawn, but he didn't grab the other pawn, so, you know, he was okay, because he couldn't, because it was protected. But I think Nathan, you know, maybe trying to preserve some winning chances by like not allowing king and knight, but this is pretty hard to imagine resulting in anything but a draw, because people can sack their piece for pawns, and even black's pawns that are remaining are edge pawns. So but never know what happens in chess, especially when these pawns get rolling. I guess if anyone's going to win at this point, it'll be black. Yeah, because this king's sitting on a light square. Bishop's never going to move the king off that square. So black really has nothing to worry about here, and he can push his pawns playing for a win. Probably not going to happen, but still a pretty nice position to be in against National Master as a low-rated player. Kind of on the plus side of a draw here. So very well played game by Daniel. And we still haven't covered, okay, these last two games. So let's cover the entire game between Norm and Nathan. So this is interesting. Norm going for a center game. Norm usually playing Stonewall, playing Kale. Deciding to get a little bit, okay, going for a Danish Gambit even, so very aggressive. I like center game, I don't love Danish Gambit. I go for queen takes, knight, and queen here. And then I was kind of talking earlier about I love it if they play stuff like d6 that's passive, because I'm going to get my stuff rolling, and I'm going to probably play this and prevent them from playing d5. But Danish kind of going all out to get developed, but really it's a bit much, and black can memorize some certain ways to really get a big advantage. So here though, Nathan just going for cool and collected development, nothing trying to ultimately punish the Danish. Just saying, cool, I'm just going to keep developing, and I'm up on. So bit crazy, but it looks like Norm's going to ultimately end up winning this game against Nathan, so that's pretty impressive. Wow. And yeah, just finding a nice tactic already out of the opening. Just amazing. This queen is a little bit soft on c7, and Norm finding knight b5 because pawn takes, you got the discovery on this hanging queen. Sweet. Forcing queen a5, and now you can take knight d6, so very nice tactic by Norm, doing his puzzles. And yeah, outclassing the national master in tactical vision. Alright, and it looks like white is now just won his pawn back with dividends because he's got this sweet bishop pair and black's pieces are not well coordinated. Okay, and so black decides to take here to get some winning chances since his position is getting a little bit objectively dubious. And yeah, he's forced to move the rook off, and let's just pressure this f pawn, so logical. Okay, and here, again, let me defend f7 is his idea here, but now how's this knight getting developed? Pretty rough. And just crushing advantage here. Wow. So b5, instead of moving it, just playing a4. Just with the idea of queen b7. So Norm really showing his tactical vision in this game, taking advantage of the back rank and lack of development by Nathan. So just leaving that bishop on pre, saying I'm coming into b7, which b7 is also covered, and then I'm coming into d8. Just gem of a game by Norm as far as tactical vision. And look, he's not even using that much time. And those tactics again showing weak back rank. Huge issue in tons of tactics, and weak back rank is created by not properly developing your pieces in the opening. But now, kind of playing hope chess because white is just up. Let's full. Well, I guess it's just the bishops against the knight in a totally open board is what makes this +5, I guess. Because the material is not that crazy of a difference. So that's pretty cool. You know, if he takes one of these bishops off, everything's getting, he's still got the weak back rank. His king's completely safe. This bishop is just a monster piece while also helping defend the king, multi-purpose. These pawns aren't even weak. Just kind of anchors the center while also protecting white's king, so and yeah, here just kind of in desperation, really he has no moves in the position, but lost a piece here and decided to call it here. So wow, just almost a total, yeah, I would say beginning to end total outclass by Norm in this game. Just a gem of a game, especially against such a strong player. Danish gambit paying off, giving Nathan a bit of his own medicine with the gambits. Nathan wanted to find a gambit for every opening. Well, how about Danish gambit? And leaving this queen a little vulnerable to knight b5, just sweet tactic. 126.50. I'm wondering if this was somehow prep. But If this was prep, that's also impressive. So, well, I wonder if Nathan's got games here in his online account against Danish, where he blundered knight b5 in the same position, but very possibly not. This could just be Norm's Danish specialty, and Norm knows his Danish tricks very well, because I don't think I would have found knight b5, or at least not easily. And then a4, you know, with the idea of queen b7 and rook d8, just sick. So awesome game by Norm. We might have to feature this one in Game of the Week. We'll see if I get that made. And let's not neglect our final board here. So Mitchell against Ralph. It's kind of mainstream English, symmetrical. You know they're kind of English main too when you go c4, knight f6, knight c3, because if you play e6, they can play e4 here, or this Machinas. And so it's kind of the way super c4 mains like to handle knight f6 with knight c3, so they can have that option. And symmetrical English. Okay. So both sides probably going to be very comfortable. Probably haven't played a lot of blitz games here. We're seeing that with their clock usage. You know, a3 seems a bit slow to me. A lot of pawn moves. Pawn moves are slow in the opening. Pawn moves are not developing your pieces, so you kind of want to make the minimum pawn moves possible to develop all your pieces in castle. And you can see here, we've already made a pawn move that can help our bishop develop, and we still have to castle. So to me, castle is more of a no-brainer than a3, and I'm not really scared of knight b4. What's the knight going to do there? It's jump here. I mean, I control that square. Jump here. It has no bishop to use in tandem, and I control that. So not understanding a3. Okay. But, you know, okay, it's also the typical, okay, I guess I am understanding a3, because typical kind of Botvinnik queenside expansion plan is a3, rook b1, b4. And a lot of times in symmetrical English, especially as say if both sides had played, that's what I'm a little more familiar with. Botvinnik structure, it's almost a race for that, because whoever gets pawn, rook, pawn first, the tactics usually favor them a little bit more. And the other side, usually if they realize, hey, I'm about to lose that race, they have to settle for like b6, bishop b7. And so I think this is actually pretty classy play by Mitchell, if I'm remembering my Botvinnik days. I used to play e4, c5, 2c4 as an anti-Sicilian before I learned Open Sicilian. And I would play this plan all the time, and I would delay castling to get a3, b4 in for sure. So, okay, but anyways, this kind of definitely feel like this is a bit weird. You know, you're opening his rook and kind of giving him nice central control with his pawn. Plus, you know, the bishop's not even pressuring the rook here. You know, I think there's the saying in chess, to take is a mistake. You know, you want to get all your pieces developed too. That's another way that's kind of anti-positional, anti-developing, like A3 earlier, is taking your opponent's piece. It's just, that's your whole move. You could have developed a piece. And a lot of times when they recapture that piece, it improves their position in some way. So either they recapture with an undeveloped piece, so it becomes developed, or in this case, they move a pawn from B file to the C file, and that controls the center a lot better. You know, you want to fight for the center throughout the game. White's probably going to play E4 later. Now they have a lot of control. And that also kind of shows why D5 was a bit potentially anti-positional, although the computer definitely likes it still, so it's fine. But you can see here, I think we talked in a game earlier about when you have to recapture the piece, you're conceding those central squares. So if you had a pawn on, you know, if you go E6, D5, and then they take, when you recapture the pawn, you're still controlling the central squares that pawn controlled. But now, when you recapture the knights, white can use these squares for his pieces. Especially this square looks nice, because you can maybe control that square, but now you're weakening your king. This all adds up. Okay, so I don't love knight takes c3 unsolicited. Fighting for the center like that. Yeah, a bit awkward, but he doesn't want to get a backwards pawn. I feel like, though, this is a little loose, potentially walking into stuff like this later, because now it's actually looking nice to expand here. You know, maybe king h8 expand, because that's looking a lot more potent when it's coming with tempo on a bishop. Okay, it doesn't like queen e7. Definitely doesn't like my move. Okay, queen e7, so we got a threat here. So I just want us to anchor that threat, and let's just get this bishop on the long diagonal. Try to oppose this monster and potentially trade this guy off, weaken his king in the future. So I think b6, that the engine points out, makes a lot more sense than queen e7. And this diagonal is where your bishop wants to be. Let's just say, but also I guess maybe not, because now he's stacking up here on this backwards pawn, so it's easier said than done when you got the engine in front of you. But we've got two defenders, so I guess this is still just fine. He's not going to be able to get a third attacker on it, and this bishop is kind of blunted and weird. Okay, so now kind of building this pawn chain, and now this pawn's not backwards since he didn't play e4 earlier. But this does weaken this square, which black has a lot of control over. And it's not exactly clear what piece wants to use this square that you're expanding with. So yeah, c4 takes it from plus 1.3 to zeros, just because it really has no purpose. You're ceding the central square, and you're gaining a little bit more control over a square you're not about to actively use. You know, if you had a knight on stuck on d1, you know, maybe this would be great. But pawns don't move backwards. That's another big positional idea in chess, and so this pawn is flexible right now. It can move to c4 at any moment, and so unless you really want to, you know, now you're kind of saying I'm never going to really smash the center, although it's not that likely anyways, but maybe it is when you got bishop and knight supporting and you get the rook behind. But you're also kind of saying, you know, use this square forever. Hey bishop, stay super active and become a good piece the entire game. Okay, and he gets a nice entrenched pawn chain here, but you know, pawn's on the same color as bishop. It's not awesome. So kind of a bit over eager here too. Computer just likes b6, and I think preparing. It just wants to anchor this pawn. It doesn't want the queen defending this pawn. It wants a pawn doing that duty so the queen can do what it wants. But jumps in, looks natural, gets some nice. Black's got nice central control. Hey, it seems like the opening went well for black type of thing. Usually black doesn't get this type of central control in most games, but it's not turning out to matter in this game because this is actually still nice for white. With this monster bishop, this backwards weakness, and this, this bishop that black is kind of basing their position around when they set up their opening, and it turned out to be staring at its own pawn chain, kind of getting a little bit stifled. Okay, let's keep going though. So rook's invading, doing a nice doubling on the weakness that you're focused on. So this is looking really nice for Mitchell now. And it looks like he's eager to trade off this bishop, but why? To me, I mean, yeah, I guess he's protecting the pawn, so that's his core purpose. But this bishop's kind of bad, and this bishop is not, it's not on the same colors as central pawn, so this is our good bishop. But makes a lot of sense too. You don't want to have the queen takes A, and it looks like trading this bishop off. It is now. This bishop actually is useful here, attacking our quote-unquote weak pawn. That's not really weak because it's only superficial threats going to be coming against it. So yeah, I definitely don't hate that either. But he is kind of trading his good bishop for black's bad bishop here. But he's still left with his monster bishop against this one that looks kind of stupid and is staring at this d2. So maybe his maneuver from earlier was kind of genius. Kept his position super solid, and black kind of just played right into it. Let me, might have been a lot more scary to come f5, f4 earlier. I'm not sure where, but. And now we can see that white is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So white's up this clean pawn that they just won, and getting into conversion phase. So a bit odd here, I'd say, throwing this king on the light squares. I guess he doesn't want rook takes rook to come with check, but now the king's on the diagonal. It's for bishop pins or something, but really hard to imagine anything going too wrong here. I think you get to a position like this now, you get to conversion phase, you want to potentially rank the endgames you want, up a clean pawn and stuff. You still just want to play normal moves, make good piece trades and stuff. But you can rank those endgames, so okay, what would be the best? A pure pawn endgame. Great. That'd be such an easy win. What would be the next best? Just these light square bishops probably would be pretty easy. Next best would probably be probably queens with this passer, because you can keep pushing the passer. The queen can support the passer can support the queen, and the king's pretty safe here, so you can't really imagine him getting perpetual threats and stuff. And then probably the pure rook endgame would be the most likely to be drawish, just because of the nature of rook endgames, even though it's probably still winning for white. So that's what I'd probably start to mentally frame myself and when I'm making piece trades. And so yeah, I'd be totally eager to trade rooks, because I feel like black's last hope is maybe get a pure rook endgame. So white does that, and okay, I'd much rather have queens off and just the bishop endgame if he can make that happen. So okay, and he's done that. So Mitchell on his way to my suggested conversion method. Now activating his king, although he's probably going to get checked away here. I guess not. So I guess, yeah, white not wanting to commit their pawn to light squares in this same color bishop ending with pawns on light. Okay, and trading off one pawn to get another weak one here. Definitely like it. And now his king's potentially getting into these pawns, so Mitchell liking the endgame technique and the conversion of the extra pawn here. Yes, Miles, you were lost. So we'll jump back to Miles' game and finish. You were actually dead winning, but his tactics did all work with bishop d5. Or bishop e5 at the end here. Yep, so lost from here. Throw the bar on. So here he had king d7, king f7. And -5. So a bit brutal. Last chance here was here. Winning moves were rook c8, king d7, and rook f8. Defend the pawn this way, and when he takes, just get the queen and rook and start attacking this way. So it looks like most of the winning moves were kind of allow him to take this bishop, counterattack the king with rook and queen to mate it. Because also queen takes b6, just allow this and build the wall here. Get the rook in and mate. But hard to find with super low time, and yeah, throughout most of this game you were +5, just kind of continuously. So yeah, and honestly, stick tactic too, if with knight takes e6 was totally top engine move. So nice setup there. And knight c4, yeah, here you had knight takes g7 immediately, but you did find it a couple moves later. And yeah, here you needed rook e6, so this was a pretty big blunder by John. So yeah, I would say very well played. I'm not sure where you lost your time. That's probably the only criticism there. So looks like tanked. Knight takes g7 makes perfect sense. And yeah, maybe a little bit quicker here on rook ft1 is where he lost a lot of time. But hard to play this position. So yeah, thanks for tuning in though. Okay, Ezekiel against Eddie is one of 2 live games left. Okay, and Daniel against Nathan did end in a draw here, so makes perfect sense. And let's check out how this attack's developing. Okay, we already saw this. Yep, queen coming in. And everything lined up. Okay, takes. And invading this way. Okay. So Eddie missing a minor chance here. Knight f3. Engine points out. And rook h5, picking on this pawn. You know, can't go forward really. If it goes forward, crazy. Knight g5. Cool. So that's checkmate. So knight g5, shocker. Nice way to develop an attack, because if you have a bishop I in h7, knight g5 definitely doesn't come to the eye unless you've seen that in the puzzle. So let's see how the game's going. So that was his very hard to find move, backwards knight move, needing to also see, I guess they wouldn't necessarily play f4, so it's probably a computerish move. And this kind of makes sense, pressuring this bishop. So he took here. Got something to pick on here a little bit, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Same pawns. Engine says +1, but probably just because of the super passive bishop, it's staring at its own pawns. It's kind of like a big pawn, versus this is just, it's attacking and it's flexible. It can move around and do things. Flex pawns on dark as well, which is nice for the same color bishop endgame. So yeah, this one I think still definitely has some life left. We'll come back to it. And Mitchell doing the nice conversion here. Let's see how it's going. Okay, yep. Yeah, now coming for these pawns on light. Just don't take it yet. So yeah, this is looking pretty brutal. And yeah, he's just got to, he wants to calculate out everything because he wants to make sure he can't play king takes, move the king away, and queen that pawn somehow. And so engine also showing nice little improvement, g5 before you even play king f6, bishop takes, just to get your pawn one square closer to queen before all these fireworks pop off. And that king is allowed in by this bishop getting traded off and no longer controlling access to this pawn. So no reason to hurry, but looks like Mitchell is well on his way to securing this, allowing no counterplay for black at all. Just brutal conversion. So good job by Mitchell, assuming he makes that happen. And yeah, let's just stick to our last game here between Eddie and Ezekiel. Okay, so Ezekiel here, trading rooks. And this is getting +2 for Eddie, so it is just a winning endgame because of the difference in bishop quality and pawn structure related to the bishops. But Eddie's pretty good at endgames, but I don't see him being some sort of masterclass converting this perfectly with equal material. So we'll see how it plays out. He's clearly got a lot of good chances, but this is not some trivial win for white unless you're FIDE master or something. Gonna grab some water while we watch this one close out. This is the last game. Alright, so let's just do a quick recap since we're getting to the end of the night. Board 1, we had Robert against Dane, and we had a pretty even game throughout. Robert just having a blunder at the end, allowing his knight to get pinned to his king right here. This defined the game and allowed Dane to win. And this was pretty trivial. Miles against John. Miles pretty much outplaying John throughout most of the game, but John found a killer tactic in time pressure at the end that totally wins. So chess is cruel, I would say, is the theme of this game. Yeah, nice little positional play there, trading off the active bishop, but total zeros type of position. And Miles finding, John playing a little loose move here, making this bishop unprotected, allowing knight takes e6 with queen to come, and that was kind of the beginning of the end of the tactics for John, and what led to Miles getting a really winning position. And then it was just, we can see here, a minute 52 on his clock, playing all these moves on increment. And John, of course, realizing that and probably pressuring the clock, knowing he's completely lost, and the clock is really, that's the chance. And here, allowed John doing what you need to do when you need to swindle, get your pieces as active as you possibly can at any cost. And so getting a queen and rook on the 7th in a position like this is a dream. So good for John on setting himself up. And this move makes perfect sense. You don't want this bishop to hang, plus you want to defend here. But just boom, bishop takes e5, brutal tactic. We got back rank threats coming with rook d1, and if you play bishop takes, then we have battering ram mate. So you play bishop back to anchor, we're just going to mate you this way. So brutal double threat, and white really would have had to find a pretty tough move. A little bit easier to find with time on the clock, but especially difficult on increments because no one wants to just sack a piece. But could have played queen takes here and gotten a nice brutal attack in. But John, nice I would say upset wins against both Miles and Connor the past 2 weeks, and showing he came to play this month. Ezekiel again, Eddie against Ezekiel, still ongoing. We're gonna watch the last few minutes, but we'll do a recap of the game. We had kind of 3d4 Petrov. Eddie really showing he's going to play it the most aggressive way. And, we had, I would say the theme of this game is maneuvering. Yeah, it's kind of funny, knight back, knight back. But probably pretty typical Petrov maneuvers I don't understand perfectly. And, I'd say g5, lash up for no great reason. Definitely let Eddie get a nice big attack. He never really ended up undermining this knight anyways. Yeah, and he ultimately just ended up taking it with his bishop. So, all that undermining the knights to just eventually trade it off for your good bishop that's on the opposite color of your central place pawn, and end up with just a total dud. So this was a great piece, but so was this. So hey, white's like, sure. And now we've kind of got an endgame where we got equal material, but it's positionally completely winning for white due to pawns on white and this terrible bishop. But we'll see how it plays out. This one, unfortunately, was over very quickly. Opening blunder that Connor took advantage of. Big theme for tonight, I'd say back rank stuff, because this one was pretty equal and headed towards just kind of a practical end game up until boom, rook takes d4. It was a massive blunder, full piece, because of back rank mate threat. Nathan against Daniel. We had Black Mardimer. Nathan showing his preferred gambit against Scandi. And playing this kind of cool knight f4 idea, just preventing h6 because you're going to fracture that structure. I thought that was a pretty cool idea from this game from Nathan. Yeah, bishop e2. Bishop e2 a bit odd. You know, maybe let's just pressure that pawn, but no big deal there. Yep, and that idea comes to realization. He blinks and plays h6 and lets his structure get fractured. And this ultimately kind of just turned into let's trade pieces. And okay, yeah. Although Black did actually have huge winning chances here when they found rook takes b3 and knight d3. You know, Black actually did have a winning position here for a while, playing around rook, knight, pawn, and you know, getting this guy up the board by anchoring this pawn, preventing this rook from taking. So Black actually outplayed White's, I would say, in this middle game. You know, up until just completely blundering rook takes e6, kind of letting everything turn around. And after that, we just basically had a drawn position, where they both kind of tried to play for some things, but it was pretty unrealistic. Either side had winning chances with low pawn counts and a minor each that can kind of sack themselves for a passer if dire circumstances appear and they're not going to have many material left. So that's how this finished. I think we have game of the week here between Norm and Nathan. Just a sweet beginning to end Danish gambit attacking game with a sick knight b5 tactic right here, followed by a really cool move later in the game, a4, just allowing I don't care, sure, I don't care, and GG. So, you know, finding tactics like queen b7 is pretty cool, and definitely a game I would want to show my friends and have on my resume, especially being a national master as a lower rated player. So awesome game by Norm, and very well deserved victory there. Engine approves. Nathan has nothing too much to be ashamed there besides missing knight b5 to start, and the snowball never stopped. Jeremy against Asher. We had kind of pretty odd English where bishop c5, bishop b7, and then got some typical development, but this kind of knight d5 jump, a little premature. D3 would have been more called for, getting ready for bishop b7, bishop b3, and then also getting ready to eventually play ideas like h3, g4, and realize this bishop is going to be offsides staring at an anchored pawn chain. But, you know, really what happened here was blunder. So that's what decided this game. So despite all these, you know, positional nuances and hey, it'd be cool to develop in this way or that way, you know, what really decides most of these games is you got to see these critical variations, and then when they happen in your games, you got to find the critical refutations. Asher did that game. So queen takes d5, hits the rook. D4 protects and probably is what he's relying on, but bishop takes c2, hits the queen, and that's just a piece. So, yep, just a bit of an oversight by Jeremy, but otherwise very nicely played positional game and kind of was on his way to an opening takeover with getting this in and this in, and potentially should have given b5 some consideration, but knight a5 was maybe cashing it in too early. So yeah, if I was here, yeah, I'd definitely be eager to start doing the positional crush with, I'm thinking I want my pawn on d3 because I know that bishop's going to end on g6, and he's already got sweet control of d4. There's no reason I ever want to play with that square. Sure, you take that square, I want to just take the white squares and try to make your bishop look stupid. So that's that game. And okay, this is a little closer than I thought it would be, but looks like it's totally winning still. Mitchell against Ralph. We had the symmetrical English. Mitchell kind of setting up the b4 expansion, but then jumped in here, and so he took the advantage to recapture towards the center, which is very positional and good. And I would say this was a bit unnecessary by Ralph. This bishop move looked a little awkward, like, okay, it might run into this stuff, but ended up working out very well, as this pawn chain ended up being a nice, sweet anchor point. And later pieces got traded here, and these pawns just ended up completely killing the activity of this bishop staring at its own pawns. So this positionally ended up working out great for Mitchell. He's got a winning positional advantage at this point with terrible difference in piece quality, plus just a sweet backwards pawn to focus on with an open b file and a long diagonal. He ends up winning that pawn, and now he's on his way to converting it in the endgame. So kind of got his king pushed back a little bit. Bit surprised by that. I feel like it's not totally necessary. Maybe just g5. Let's just do it this way and calculate that. Make sure I'm queening first with my g-pawn. Is maybe how I would have done it. But now he's kind of getting his king back a little bit. But okay, and trade one pawn here. I guess it makes sense because he needs to just get his king some more squares, but anytime you're trading pawns as a defender, it's nice. So that's, Black's got to feel at least a little bit good about that. And we've got our... Okay, and so now we're trading. You got to be really certain you're not losing the pawn in game when you're going to trade your bishop, but it makes sense. He's basically made it here. So has to trade that bishop, and now this is totally winning for white. Just going to use this pawn to go forward, so actually nothing to criticize there. I mean, maybe bringing the king back slightly for a second, but yeah, sweet endgame technique by Mitchell. I kind of envy it. I wish I could convert my games as cleanly as he made this look. So let's jump back to our last active game that maybe has some chances for one side or the other at zeros. Say we kind of completed our recap there. Let's do one more plug for our sponsor too. Matt was in the chat earlier tonight. We have awesome national master locally who owns a company called Chess Goals, simple chess courses for non-grandmasters. So learn complete repertoires in under 100 lines. So he has all sorts of opening courses and some non-opening courses as part of his website. You can buy the individual courses or buy pass to all the courses. Also gets you access to a private Discord where Matt answers questions about any of the courses. So you get PGNs, videos. You can take the PGMs, load them to a spaced repetition software like Lee Study or Chess Tempo, and drill your lines that way, while also getting all the strategic and conceptual ideas from Matt. So yeah, check out chessgoals.com if you're looking for an interesting club level repertoire where these lines are actually going to appear in your club games, and you're going to see them on the board. And yeah, so all right, let's turn the engine on here. Total zeros. So Eddie was totally winning this game positionally, but looks like it slipped somewhere, and it would slip for me too, but this was +2. Gonna have to have Connor on here commenting to show the winning plan of winning this endgame, because how it played out was, looks like his fatal mistake was, he had as much as 3.9 here, just g4. So black unprotecting his rook, and that's a blunder. Just defend the rook here. That's probably what he missed. So we expand, trying to check. Well, let's just get going. So, okay, so black did actually blunder, and white had a chance to win here with g4. And now they had h4 here. a5, not quite. h4, king h5, g4, similar idea, just this rook's loose. And to me this is also, yeah, I guess, okay, so he's playing against g4 now. So maybe realizing his rook's loose. I was thinking maybe anchor's a little stronger, but playing against this pawn. But what really flipped it here? Yeah, okay, h5, a5. So went from +4 to +1 here. I guess this is just allowing the rook too much counterplay, or hard to see why a5 totally kills your winning chances in the endgame. I guess it's because +4 was really h4, g4. So your positional line is only +2, and that's c4. Same thing. Okay, it's all just variants of this tactic. Okay, but here they're both starting to play on increment. Well, Eddie's not quite there yet. Eddie's still comfortable. Anytime he's above a minute, he's good. Oh, under a minute now, though. Turn this engine off so my fan doesn't blow so loud. Yeah, the objective evaluation here is zeros, or +0.1. So yeah, all that his big chances were around that g4 tactic against the rook. And now it's maybe petering out towards a draw, but who knows? They're both playing on increment, and this isn't a lifeless position at all. Okay, rook a4, offering a rook trade. And I'd be a little nervous about this pawn. if I'm black, maybe I'm almost happy to trade rooks here. Maybe try to get at this pawn somehow. A bit unrealistic, but now my bishop doesn't feel quite as bad as it did earlier. It feels a little more useful, even though it's still kind of staring at white pawns. It's okay, I want to protect those pawns now, but still white's bishop a little better. Always better to be attacking than defending. Alright, Ezekiel under 15 seconds. Probably going to get a little bit of delay from the DGT. The clocks won't be totally accurate. But gotta see it move in a second here. Okay, they decided to trade rooks. I say we got a nice round start tonight. Right on time or right around there, since both players are playing on increments and it's only not even 10:30 yet, so nice job to the organizers to get everything rolling on time. Probably Eddie showed up on time today. Alright, King E3 played. Trying to control F4 check. We're trying to control F4 and King F5. Still zeros. Okay, King G4 advancing. No evaluation change. I'm going to have to rely on the engine a bit here because I'm not an endgame god. I aspire to be one in the future, but not an area I've focused a huge amount of study beyond, you know, basic king and pawn endgames and Lucina and Philidor, but it's not like I know nothing, but same color bishop ending with a weird pawn structure is not exactly my forte. But definitely prefer white. I mean, because black's pawns are fixed on white, the bishops are white. But objectively, it's zeros. Oh, now it's +2. So he needed to play King H3, come in, and H4 is actually a winning move that he found it. So interesting. Now the evaluation is +4. Looks like Eddie's got great winning chances here. He's going to be able to start attacking these pawns. Eventually zugzwing that king out. I mean, the bishop can make weighty moves, but so let's see what's the strategy here. It's not like this is going to be super easy for Eddie to find, but he's got wins here. Objectively winning. So yeah, theme of this game is definitely Eddie's had all the wins, from what I can remember. He's missing them, but He's putting the positional pressure on Ezekiel. Yep, still objectively winning for white now. Both players on increment, but you can build up a lot of time, 30 seconds per move, in a position like this. Both sides make some bishop moves. And he's got Zugzwang ideas. Just play some waiting moves with his bishop. Bishop d1, bishop b3 are kind of nice. But it makes sense. I mean, his pawn structure is ideal. His king's in a very active position. He's got weak pawns to attack. They're all fixed on late. Bishop d2, still winning. So e6, bishop takes king e5 is a winning idea here. But yeah, definitely hard to play. 10 seconds on your clock. And this is still winning. So this is probably more practical. So both players play on increment, but building up a fair amount of time to think here. You know, this is how games can go to midnight on Saturday night in a weekend tournament. Make a lot of bishop moves. And ending like this. I'm going to step away for a moment, but we'll of course leave it on this board until it concludes. And we already did the summary, so if you're looking for the summary of all the games, just go a little earlier in the replay. And I did do a summary of all the games. I usually do it towards the end, but we just had this one game that's been going super long. Still objectively winning for white. Of course, defend the pawn. But he's about to run out of moves. Well, it's hard to see the way moves white's gonna make. I guess now you can make king waiting moves. Try to force that bishop to move, and then maybe play bishop f7. Because now the king, it doesn't really matter that your king's not in ideal position for a moment. But also can even play waiting moves like this. But I mean, you're already in good position. I would be playing the king waiting move. And he does. So Eddie on the way to clutching this. Now it's looking pretty straightforward. Bishop's got to move. Bishop f7. Yeah, Ezekiel's going to tank here, probably down to his last seconds because there's not a good move to find. Always a brutal position to be in a classical chess game. You're desperately trying to find any resource, and you realize after you analyze there was none. But gotta try your best. So, well played game by Eddie. I definitely say, though, some misses with not winning earlier with g4 ideas. But hey, win's a win. Okay, Ezekiel's played bishop c8. That should be opening the door to bishop f7. And he plays it. Now he might try bishop b7. And that's a bit unclear. Your next waiting move, but probably just king up to f5 or f4. And if the bishop shuffles, you just pick up the f pawn. Yep, we got too many weak pawns on light squares, and his king is in terrible position, and white's king is in good position. So even I can see how this could be winning. Alright, BB7, expecting king f4. Looks like bishop waiting moves are even stronger, just not allowing this. Because this does allow, the bishop to get some activity. But you gotta win some material at some point, so I can't. definitely not fault him for playing king f4. Yeah, that's still totally winning, even if he gets this activity in. Oh, it goes for e6. So this was not the path. We're back to zeros. So this is what happens. You plan on increment. He had 8 seconds left when he made that move. But just continue with the Zugzwig plans. Would have been a little more potent. Okay, and he's seeing, okay, he's picking this pawn up. So he's still on his way. But king f6 is getting close to draw. Yep. And now bishop c8 picks the pawn up. So Ezekiel got a chance for salvation here. Bishop c8. You can't push because your bishop is let's play king takes bishop. So yeah, e6 was definitely a bit hasty. Never hurry in endgames. But you can see why you want to be a little hasty when you have 8 seconds left. But yeah, this is definitely kind of a cardiogram game of, I mean, black never had any winning chances, but white's got a lot of miswins in this game. But still maybe on their way to winning. Bishop c8 only move for black. And not obvious. But finds it. Total zeros now. So I imagine he's going to try to maybe get his h-pawn going, but that's black's in time to take the e-pawn and get back to the h-pawn. Yep, getting the h-pawn going, but he can just take on e6 and the king's going to get back in time. And now maybe it's white who's the one who has to kind of grovel a little bit. We'll see how this all plays out. I mean, it's drawn at this point. But Eddie's going to be not too happy when he looks at the game analysis here. Might even have Connor going over after the game, pointing out the miswins. Always brutal when endgame expert Connor's watching you try to convert your win. And now they're still playing on increments. We're down to a pawn endgame. This game has really seen the full dramatic arc, and it's in its final stage. Four hours later, it comes down to this. Been working hard for the last 4 hours, and you're playing a pawn endgame on increment. You know, one wrong move, it could all be over. Alright, well, clearly the king's got to stop that guy, so I'm trying to kind of use his H pawn, and then he's going to take the F pawn. Hope to maybe win those other pawns, but the problem is I think Black's just going to play D4, trade that last pawn off. And even though White is going to... Yeah, I mean, then he'll have his own pasture White's going to have to deal with. Plus, you can always imagine someone ending pawn up, but the other side has opposition. Yep, Black, very good move there, D4. Makes perfect sense. What else? Okay, takes. I think we're headed towards handshakes because I don't see many ideas for either side at this point. So Eddie looks like he's going for King E2 to King D3, just trying to make sure he definitely secures the draw. Doesn't allow White to take his H pawn and then distract him with his D pawn. I mean, D pawn's scary, so that's what you got to go for. King E2. Although he might play G4 here as well, it's also drawn and pretty clean to calculate. G4, FG, King takes, D3, King F3 catches it, and G4, F4 makes no sense, just King takes pawn, D3, King catches it. He's also calculating H7, but it's pointless. Yeah, there's no way White has any winning chances here, so I would just play G4 if I was stopping and taking this. But yeah, King E2 also makes perfect sense. King takes. He's going to play King takes H, King D3, King H5, King takes pawn, King G4, and King E5. You make contact with the enemy pawn. They can never take your pawn without you taking theirs. If they push it, the pawns trade. So nice defense by Ezekiel, finding his only moves against E6. So he found bishop C8, he found bishop takes D6, he found D4. And he really had him on the ropes though. In total Zugzwang for a while. Or close to it, obviously. Total, he probably would have won, but both sides here just make... Again, they've been playing for 4 hours. You got to just double, triple check. You're not missing something. You're not missing a win. You're not about to blunder. But nothing to play for either side here. Just might as well play King G5 and King G4, because White can't get back to protect that pawn, but yep, and here we get to a totally drawn position. It's getting late. Just got to take the pawn. Let him take your pawn. And I think we will see that shortly here. Bear Kings left. A hard-fought battle completed. So that's the last game of the night. I will be back next week by myself again, and we're gonna have the I am Nubair on as much as possible. But yeah, he's playing the Thailand Open right now, so that's why he's gone this week, and he'll be gone next week as well. But he will be returning on the 24th. So we'll have some nice commentary by I am with 3GM Norms. Upgrade from tonight, definitely. But thanks so much for tuning in, and thanks to everyone who's watching the replay. Appreciate it, and I will see you guys next week.